Look at this little guy. This little guy right here caused us quite a bit of frustration earlier. Little O-ring up, and it's gone. Well, it wasn't just the O-ring, it was a couple other things. We've got ourselves a 2007 Chevrolet Avalanche right here. This is the truck hybrid looking SUV thing. It also came equipped with some O2 sensor defeat spacers. These things are designed to put an air void in between your O2 sensor and the bung at the catalytic converter, just past the converter. The theory behind these is if you have a failing converter setting a P420 or a P430 trouble code, you stick these little spacers in here, then the downstream O2 sensors will get lazy and they will underreport back to the ECM. And so the ECM will not be able to understand that you have an inefficient catalytic converter. The trouble is I found this one on the left front upstream O2 sensor. Now that's the one that the ECM uses to determine the pulse width on the fuel injectors. So we were sending the ECM incorrect information. The ECM was then taking that information and using that to fuel the engine. And then we ended up with a check engine light and I think a P0171 and a P0174. Now, the other upstream sensor on this side over here did not come with any spacers in there, but the waveform on that one was super lazy. It would spike up and then sit there and linger and then drop and then linger and then maybe come up some and linger. It just was not working the way it was supposed to. So what we did when we preliminarily diagnosed this is we pulled these things out, installed a pair of known good O2 sensors upstream, and then reset fuel trims, then drove the vehicle to see where the fuel trims landed at. We started off on our long terms at 30. It's like 29 and 30, bank 1 and bank 2. After replacing sensors and removing these spacers from the incorrect location, we got it down to like 16 to 18 per side. We had found a vacuum leak at this hose right here where it connects to the valve cover. There's a PCV type of baffle in this valve cover, which then connects the cover to this little fitting, which is plumbed into the intake tube right here. So this is on the non-vacuum side of the intake. The engine's sucking in air. There's a restriction at the throttle plate. So there's vacuum in the manifold and everything attached to the manifold. No vacuum here, so it was just basically pulling in some ambient air using a Venturi effect because there is air moving through here. That was causing some slight fuel trim skewing issues, and I can prove it to you. Watch this. So we're going to take a look at our short terms. Short terms on 1 and 2. I'm going to unplug this right here, isolating this tube from the valve cover. We should see those fuel trims start to go positive. Right there, look at that. Positive all day. And the long terms are following suit. Look at that. Bam, right through the roof. So we had fixed a vacuum leak at that little rubber hose, but our fuel trims were only stabilizing, 12, 13, 11, 9 was the best number we saw. Now the threshold for a P0171 and P0174 system lean is roughly on our long-term values around 10 or 11. So where we're sitting right here, 8 and 9, we are very, very, very close to being at our threshold. The little O-ring that I showed you earlier actually goes, let me show you. Let's take this guy off. Now take note of those fuel trims one more time. I'm gonna pop that guy off, and this O-ring that's the one we saw earlier. It was all flattened and collapsed, and it was causing a vacuum leak. If we look at the graph here, that vacuum leak is again represented by this thing being removed. So what's happening is air is being sucked in through that oil fill hole, entering the baffle system in that valve cover, and then back through this tube, and then the intake is sucking it up. Now, the reason that that's causing an imbalance with our fuel measurements, or our air and fuel measurements, is this guy right here. That's the engine's mass airflow sensor. As the air comes past the air filter and passes over that sensor, it can calculate the volume of air going through, And that's one of the parameters used by the ECM to determine our fueling. If we introduce air into this engine downstream of this sensor, then there's more air coming in. So what will happen is the O2 sensors out back will detect an imbalance in the air-fuel ratio, tell the ECM, and then the ECM will start to pull back fuel or add fuel, whatever it sees fit. So what we're ending up with here is a conflict between our O2s and this guy, because we had one vacuum leak on that hose, another one right here, and I replaced this O-ring as well for good measure. So we potentially have 3 vacuum leaks just on the intake side. And I think we're super close. Like, we're real close. The only other concern that I have left is that there's a bit of blow-by coming out of this engine, and that blow-by is acting as a fuel once it reaches the combustion chamber, and then the O2 sensors are going, hey, I'm a little rich on my fuel in the exhaust, so let's pull back some fuel some more. So we're about to go drive it. I think we're super close because this 9 and 6, that's right in threshold. I think I cannot get it any closer to 0 unless we address the blow-by. The blow-by is probably being caused by carbon built up in the rings. I mean, we're looking at the bottom of this oil cap right here, and that's pretty crustomatic. We can tell the oil in this has not been of the highest quality over time, and the oil change intervals may have been lacking as well. So I'm going to speculate, without tearing this engine apart, that we have carbon built up on the oil control rings on the pistons, and that's giving us a fair amount of blow-by here, which is then acting as fuel, causing these slightly higher fuel trim numbers. Now, we have the cap off. This is, represents the cap being removed. With that cap back on, vacuum leak is gone. We're starting to get back down below threshold. So I think what I would recommend is that we switch this engine's oil to a top tier oil with some better detergents in it. And prior to doing so, I think we should install an engine flush solution kit where we install some heavy grade concentrated oil cleaners that are designed specifically to break down some of that carbon in that sludge. We're gonna run that through this engine, break it down, drop all the oil out, put new oil in, new filter, run a rinse oil through it, and then repeat with an actual finalized engine oil change. That may be the final solution towards keeping this check engine light off on this particular Chevrolet Avalanche. But as it sits right now, the light is not meeting criteria to turn back on. I have fixed the problem. Check engine light is gone. It took some detective work, and we had to find some rigmarole that was going on in there, but we got it solved. We got it buttoned up. And I think that's going to conclude the content on this particular video. This thing has clearly some other issues going on with it, but we're going to cross those bridges later. So I'm hanging this one up. We're closing it out. Sorry for this super short video today. It is what it is. More to come later on. Powering down. Pew!